The State of Nature, written and read by Alethea Ney. Chapter 1. John was tired of the place where he lived. Not his house or his neighborhood, those were great. It was the government. He was so tired of the elections, the warring political parties, the unbearable campaigners. Just made him feel miserable, and he was done. However, there was nowhere for him to go because America currently seemed to be the best choice still, even though it could get overwhelming at times. So, John trudged home, keeping his head down to avoid seeing all the flashy newspaper titles and campaign ads. He arrived at his house and found that someone had left him a gift, lying on his couch. Intrigued, he sat down and unwrapped it. It was a book with a black cover and only 4 words on the front. The State of Nature. Slightly bewildered, but still curious, John opened the book. On the inside of the front cover it said in fancy, loopy handwriting, "Read this book for a marvelous adventure and for a lesson about law." That seemed like a pretty good idea, to finally learn a little bit more about what law was supposed to be like without the craziness. So John flicked to the first page and began reading. Chapter 2. The moment he read the first word, he was transported to someone else's house. Even more bewildered than before, he looked around. There was no one anywhere inside the house. It was more of a cottage, and when John stepped outside, he found that he was in the middle of a dense forest. In order to find out where he was, John explored the forest for about an hour, walking in a spiral motion to ensure he didn't miss anything. Eventually, he reached a sandy beach that extended into a blue ocean. It didn't seem like there were any people here. Certainly no one has been answering my frequent calls, John thought. But I better make sure that there really is no one here before I make myself comfortable, he continued out loud. So, John climbed up one of the huge trees near the cottage and surveyed the land around him. The place he was in was an island, with blue ocean stretching out on every side and no sign of the mainland or any other people. To John, this seemed to be paradise. No more crazy political debates over topics he didn't understand. No more government at all. He would be free to live however he wanted. And so, he did. He began to improve the cottage, which he found had his name on the door. He built a fence and began to grow a garden, and John was very happy. The woods around him had everything that he could ever need to survive, and it was great to be able to work for his survival. The garden was flourishing, and the fence was amazing at keeping wild animals away. And John continued to read the little State of Nature book, and he realized that that is what he was living in, the state of nature, the state that everything is in after being created. All of this continued until one day John woke up, went outside, and saw that his fence had been ruined. Chapter 3. "What did this?" John exclaimed loudly. "It can't have been a storm because the ground is perfectly dry. Nothing else is disturbed, so obviously it wasn't just extremely windy." John moved closer to his once beautiful picket fence and stopped. Instead of asking what had done this to his amazing fence, he should have been asking who had done this. There in the dirt were boot prints. John's face reddened with anger. Whoever had decided that they could just come and destroy something that he had built with his own hands was in a lot of trouble. John stormed back into the cottage and snatched up the State of Nature book. He remembered seeing something that might be helpful in this situation. Ah, there it was. It specifically said that no person was allowed to damage another person's life, health, liberty, or possessions while in the state of nature. And obviously, because he had built the fence, it was his property, and someone had clearly damaged the heck out of it. This could not be allowed to slide. John grabbed a lamp and stormed out the door, pocketing the small book on his way out. He began following the tracks, which was fairly easy since the ground was moist and hadn't been trampled down to be firm. The trespassers' tracks were clear, and they led John right to the other end of the island, where he hadn't explored yet. There was a small cottage, not unlike John's own cottage, and standing outside was a guy whose boots fit the prints perfectly. Chapter 4. "What the heck, dude?" John said loudly to announce his presence as he stomped toward the man. The guy turned around and immediately took a step back from the obviously irate John. "What do you mean, what the heck?" he asked. John gestured back toward his own cottage with his heavy lamp. The dude flinched a little bit, but John didn't notice. You damaged my fence! Severely! John said with a passion. The other guy looked apologetic and shrugged. Sorry, man. It was an accident. I was climbing a tree, and then I saw your beautiful garden and wanted to go pick some stuff out of it. At this, John looked even more angry, but the guy wasn't finished. So, I just jumped out of the tree to go get some. But I guess I miscalculated the jump or something because I smashed your fence pretty hard. But your carrots are all right, so it's all good. He shrugged again. John was very close to hitting this guy over the head with his lamp. Luckily, he took a few deep breaths and was able to restrain himself. No, he told the guy. It's not okay. I worked for a full 30 hours on that fence, and you ruined it. The law of nature says that that's not okay. John pulled out his State of Nature book and pointed to the part about the law of nature. The guy read it and shrugged once more. Yeah, that seems legit. I'm sorry, man. I'll be more careful in the future. John shook his head. The future? But what about my fence now? He demanded. The other guy shrugged again. John was really starting to get tired of that shrug. I don't know, dude, the shrugging man said. But there's nothing you can do to make me help you out. You can't injure me or anything because that would be against the law of nature too. So, yeah. John was practically quivering with fury at this point. But then he remembered that there was something else in the State of Nature book. He began flipping through it again and found it quickly. He showed it to the other guy. See? It says that anyone can enforce the law of nature. I'm an anyone. And it also says that there are two suitable punishments, reparation and restraint. Therefore, you either have to help me fix my fence, or I will restrain you. And I have a lamp, so you should listen to me. John said all of this with a dangerous look in his eye, and the other guy gulped. Chapter 5. The other guy finally agreed to repair John's fence, after eyeing the lamp for a few seconds. He then introduced himself as Thomas, and the two of them walked back to John's house together. Thomas repaired the fence very well, and John forgave him. The two became good friends, and there was never any cause for John to have to use the law of nature on him or threaten him with a lamp again. John did continue reading the State of Nature book, however, and the things he learned were making a lot of sense. He read that there were 3 things that were missing in the State of Nature: established and settled law, a way to enforce the law, and an impartial judge. John realized that all 3 of these things would have made getting Thomas to repair his fence a lot easier. If there was an established and settled law, Thomas would have known that he was definitely not able to smash other people's fences, and if he had done so, the judge could have interpreted the law and known that this was illegal. Then, the enforcement could have done their jobs, and that would have meant that John wouldn't have had to threaten Thomas with a lamp in order to get retribution. This all sounded great to John. Maybe society and government weren't so bad after all. Nevertheless, despite the fact that John didn't hate government as much as he used to, he wanted to know if there were any catches to rejoining society. There were 2 rights that you had to give up in order to rejoin society: the right to do whatever you saw fit to preserve your life, and the power to punish crimes committed against you. This didn't seem like such a bad deal to John, and so he wrote the word home on the very last page of the book, closed his eyes, and when he opened them and saw the word home, he was immediately transported back to his own house that was in society. And it was great. The end. Here are the sources I used to write this, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening.